You're sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through someone else's life. A post about someone who finally launched their course, posted their first video, left their job, moved to Portugal, started the thing they've been talking about for 3 years. And your partner is asleep next to you. And something in your chest does this thing, this quiet, heavy thing, where you feel happy for them and gutted for yourself at the exact same time. And the thought that moves through you is not one thought, it's 3. Why do I keep saying I'm going to start and never start? What is actually wrong with me? And does she see it? Does she see that I'm becoming someone who talks about who I want to be instead of someone who is who I want to be? Maybe you close the phone. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the distance between who you are and who you said you'd be. And here's what mainstream self-help culture has completely wrong about this moment. Most people in this situation get told to just start, as if the problem is laziness, as if the person lying there just needs more motivation videos and better morning routines. But the psychology of people who dream big but never take action has almost nothing to do with discipline, and almost everything to do with the relationship you have with your own ambition, which is, at its core, a relationship like any other. It has its own attachment patterns, its own fear responses, its own cycles of reaching and retreating. And if you don't understand what's actually happening underneath, you will keep dreaming, keep planning, keep talking about one day, and keep feeling like you're disappearing inside your own potential. You are not failing your dreams. You're failing to understand why your nervous system keeps you parked exactly where you are, even when you desperately want to move. And here's the reframe that changes everything. The gap between who you are and who you want to be isn't a discipline problem. It's a psychological safety problem. And when you understand that, everything shifts. So let's get into it. Here's what most people never get told. There is a specific kind of person who is brilliant at imagining futures, who can close their eyes and build an entire version of their life, the career, the environment, the daily rhythm, the person they've become, with a clarity and a heat that almost feels physical. This person can visualize success with more detail than most people can remember their own address, and they are completely, silently stuck. And the reason? The real reason is not that they're afraid of hard work. It's that their nervous system has learned, over years of early experiences, that wanting things is dangerous. That putting yourself out there and failing is not just disappointing, it's emotionally costly in a way that feels existential. Here's the deeper truth. Your relationship with taking action is shaped by the same attachment dynamics that shape your relationships with other people. Think about that for a second. When you feel safe with a person, in a space, with an audience, your risk tolerance goes up. You speak, you create, you say the thing that might be rejected, you send the email, you start the thing. When you don't feel safe, when your nervous system reads the environment as uncertain or threatening or likely to expose you, you don't act. You plan, you research, you prepare, you wait for the right time. And the right time for someone with this pattern never comes. Not because they're not capable, not because they're not talented, but because their internal safety infrastructure, the part of them that says it's okay to be seen trying and maybe failing, was built on shaky ground long before they ever sat down to dream. And this is why talking to your partner about it can feel so loaded. Because when you're with someone who is actively building the life they want, your inaction becomes a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable when you don't like what you're seeing. So let's get into the 5 patterns that make up the psychology of the big dreamer who never takes action. And more importantly, what to do about every single one of them. Point 1. The planning trap. Most people who are chronic planners don't think of themselves as avoidant. They think of themselves as thorough, prepared, strategic. They say things like, I just need to do more research, and I'm not ready yet, and I need a better plan. And here's what their nervous system is actually saying in those moments, quietly, beneath everything else. If I plan long enough, I don't have to find out whether I'm actually good enough. Planning is safe. Planning is in control. Planning doesn't get judged. Most couples where one partner is an extreme planner and the other is an extreme doer don't actually have a motivation problem. They have a safety problem. The planner doesn't feel safe enough yet to be seen in the arena, and their partner, who moves fast and takes shots, reads that as laziness, when really it's just fear wearing a very organized outfit. Here's the disconnecting version of this. You say, I'm almost ready. I just need to finish this one course and then I'll be ready to start. Your partner hears, You keep saying that. Your brain registers, she's judging me. Her brain is quietly registering, he's going to keep saying almost for the rest of our lives. Now here's the connecting version. You say, I'm using planning as a way to not take risk. Can you just sit with me while I figure out what I'm actually afraid of? Because I think it might not be about readiness. And what moves through her is, he actually knows himself. And when that happens, when you name the pattern out loud instead of performing around it, the walls start to come down. Because shame can't breathe in honesty. And your nervous system, when it finally feels seen, starts to unclench. Point 2, the identity shield. Most people who dream big but never act have constructed something really clever without realizing it. They've built their entire self-concept around who they're going to become. And that identity, that future version of themselves, has become a shield against ever having to test whether they actually are that person. Here's the deeper emotional truth. It's psychologically safer to be a great person who hasn't started yet than to be a mediocre person who tried and fell short. This is the trap inside the trap. Your identity as someone with big dreams feels better than your identity as someone who started something and it didn't work out. So you protect the dream because the dream is the only place the version of you want to be still exists, untouched. Most people in relationships don't see this in their partner. They just see someone who talks a big game and then doesn't follow through. And they start to feel like they're living with someone who is all narrative and no action. And that creates a specific kind of exhaustion. The exhaustion of being partnered with someone who is constantly performing a future self instead of building a present one. Here's the disconnecting version. You say, I have this really clear vision of where I want to be in 3 years. Your partner says, okay, and what are you doing today to get there? You say, I'm mapping it out. What you don't say, I'm protecting my dream by keeping it in the future where it's still perfect. Here's the connecting version. You say, I think I've been hiding behind the vision because executing it means I'll find out if I'm actually as capable as I believe I am. And that terrifies me. And I don't know how to move past that, but I want to try. And something in her is saying, I've been waiting for him to say that. That's the shift that turns a relationship that feels like one person carrying the other's potential around like luggage into one where you're finally building something together in real time. Point 3, the permission problem. Here's the part no one talks about. Most people who dream big but never take action don't actually believe, at a core, felt level, that they have permission to pursue their own life. And I don't mean permission from their partner. I mean permission from a deeper place inside themselves. Something happened somewhere, a message received so early and so quietly that it became part of the architecture, that told them, you're not supposed to want this much. You're supposed to be practical. You're supposed to be realistic. Who do you think you are? And that message, that wound, lives in the nervous system, not the mind. So your conscious brain says, I want to start that business. Your nervous system, your deeper, older, more protective brain, says, are you sure? People like us don't do that. Most couples never name this dynamic, so it lives in the relationship as tension. She wants you to act because she sees your potential and she loves you and she wants you to feel good about yourself. But every time she brings it up, something in you shuts. Not because you don't care, but because her encouragement lands on a wound that is older than your relationship. And the wound says, she doesn't understand. She's asking me to do something that requires me to believe I'm allowed to, and I'm not sure I do. Here's the disconnecting version. She says, have you worked on your project this week? You say, I've been busy. She says, you always say that. You say, can you just trust me? What you feel, alone, judged, seen in the worst way. What she feels, exhausted, scared for you, resentful. Here's the connecting version. You say, hey, when you ask me about my project and I get defensive, it's not about you. I think I've been carrying this feeling that I'm not allowed to want something this big for myself. And I need you to know that, because it explains a lot of what I do and don't do. And what moves through her is, I've been trying to push someone who needed to be pulled toward a wound instead. And she softens, and you soften, and the thing between you stops being a fight and starts being a conversation about something real. Point 4, the fear of becoming visible. This is the one most couples never figure out. The person who dreams big but never takes action is almost always someone who, somewhere in their emotional history, learned that being visible was not safe. That standing out, being seen, having an opinion, taking a risk in front of others, that these things led to consequences, to embarrassment, to rejection, to the wrong kind of attention. And so they learned to be brilliant in private and almost invisible in public. Not because they don't have things to say, but because their nervous system has been calibrated, very reasonably, very intelligently, to treat visibility as a threat. Here's the emotional truth. Your ambition isn't actually the problem. Your relationship with being seen while failing at that ambition is the problem. And when you understand this, you stop trying to motivate yourself with affirmations and vision boards. Because the issue was never that you couldn't imagine your future. It's that you can't yet imagine yourself in it, publicly, visibly, with all the potential for being judged that comes with that. Most couples where one partner struggles with visibility don't have a motivation problem either. They have an intimacy problem. Because the invisible partner has been protecting themselves from the world in ways that have started to feel like distance to the person closest to them. Here's the contrast. Disconnection version. You say, I'll just start when I'm more confident. What she hears, I'll start when I'm someone I'm not yet. What you mean, I can't start until I feel safe being seen as someone who doesn't know what they're doing yet. Connection version. You say, I'm going to start before I'm ready, because I think ready was always the illusion. I'm going to be seen, and I'm probably going to be terrible at first, and I'm going to do it anyway. And something in her is saying, I forgot how hot it is when you stop waiting. That's when the person who felt like a dreamer with no follow-through starts to feel like someone who is becoming, and your partner sees it before you've done anything differently. Because the shift happens in the body first, before the action, before the output, in the decision to be seen. Point 5. The unspoken contract. Here's what nobody explains about the person who dreams big but never acts. And this one matters most for the relationship. Almost every person with this pattern has made an unconscious deal with themselves. I can want things, but I don't have to do anything about them. That way, I never have to find out if I'm not enough. And no one else finds out either. This is the deepest layer. The thing underneath the planning and the fear and the identity protection. The unspoken contract you made with yourself is, don't try. That way, you can always say, I could have. And I could have feels safer than I tried and I wasn't. But here's the cost no one talks about. That unspoken contract doesn't just keep you stuck. It keeps your partner stuck. Because they are living next to someone who is slowly disappearing inside their own potential. And every day that you don't act, a little bit of the energy between you changes. Not because she stopped loving you, but because she started grieving someone she can't fully reach. Most people don't realize this. They think the resentment comes from their partner not pulling their weight financially or professionally. But the real wound is deeper. The real wound is, I fell in love with someone who was becoming, and now I feel like I'm living with someone who has quietly decided to stop. And that feeling, that quiet, unspoken disappointment, becomes the low hum underneath everything. The unspoken. The thing neither of you knows how to name. Here's the disconnecting version. You say, I'm still figuring it out. She says, we've been together for 4 years. You say, can you just give me time? What neither of you says, I'm scared that if I name what's happening, it ends something I can't get back. Here's the connecting version. You say, I think I've been holding us both hostage with all this potential I've never used. And I think I've been protecting myself at your expense, and I didn't even see it until right now. I'm sorry, and I want to do something differently. Not perfect, not big, just different, starting now. And what moves through her is something like, there he is. And what moves through you is something like, the person I was waiting to become was inside the conversation I was afraid to have. Here's what I want you to take with you. This isn't about discipline. It's not about morning routines or accountability apps or hustling harder. Those things can help, but if the psychological architecture underneath, the safety, the permission, the visibility wound, the unspoken contract, doesn't change, you'll build elaborate systems and still find yourself on the edge of the bed at 11:47 at night, scrolling through someone else's life. This isn't a productivity course. This is an invitation to do the inner work that makes outer action actually possible, and to bring the person you love into that process as a witness and a partner, rather than a silent audience to your avoidance. When you understand why you don't act, the why starts to dissolve. Not because you talked yourself into it, but because you finally stopped being afraid of what you'd find underneath. And when you internalize that, when you really let it in, you stop waiting for the right time, the right plan, the right